Hello, welcome back to the YouTube channel of Bethel Evangelical Free Church Hanley. I'm Pastor Gervais Charnley. This is another Shropshire church. This is the church of St Mary, Neen Savage. Savage, of course, but hopefully for the local big house family at one point rather than any reflection upon the character or behaviour of the local people. This is a Norman church. This is a single long building. There's no distinction between nave and chancel. Structurally, they are one big long space. And as you can see here, they're distinguished between the two. They're distinguished from one another by the location of the screen. We'll have a good look at that when we get up there. So let's have a look around here. And so all together now, as usual, we begin at the west end. Obviously, there's been a major Victorian restoration here. It's by Thomas Gordon in 1884. The font is sort of vaguely Normanish, and obviously is from that date, and the seats are your typical Victorian seats. Note here you've got this solid bit at the back again to protect people against drafts. Blocked north doorway. Above it is a Norman window, which is a great diagnostic tool. These old windows, you wouldn't introduce a fake Norman window like that. That's original. The walls, you'll see, are slightly ochre. This is actually genuinely what would have been the case in the Middle Ages. We have here a memorial to the late John Hinksman, Esquire, of Westwood in the parish of Oldbury, Shropshire, a memory of his father and mother and their issue. So, Richard Hinksman, his father, late of Neen Savage, died January the 7th, 1782, aged 83 years. Lieutenant Robert Charles Northwood, R.A., Royal Artillery, of this parish, killed in action at Maysbury, Holland, 28th of November 1944, aged 29 years. The Victorian pulpit, of course, the screen, although it has been restored, there is some indication it is a medieval screen. The obvious thing that's been restored here is the coping there, and then above which, in the Middle Ages, there would have been a rood loft. There we have a stained glass window, nativity. Pass through the screen to the chancel. Look at this lovely little organ, little chamber organ there. Sort of instrument that would be at home in a country house, but also at home in a little country church like this. It's going to be... these things are usually kept locked, but if there's a maker's place, it to be inside, they're not visible, and there's no information. We have there the aumbrys, quite big. Again, you can see the frames where they would have had their, where they would have their frames for the doors. Triple lancets, very slender. They do look to be genuine medieval. Piscina there. And there's the corona, just a corona, i.e. crown. And the idea of the corona is that you've got these candles, and it's a way of lighting the interior. There's that organ, still much in use. So it's a very handsome church, not a lot in the way of memorials inside, not a lot in terms of big houses. It's very different, of course, from Kinlet just up the road, which is all big house memorials. We do have here's a memorial for the Lloyd Baker family and the ancestors, the Soleys, and they were lords of the manor. Lordship of the manor does not make you a noble. It is it's a kind of obsolete land holding which had a, well, in some ways, connection with certain rights and powers. And again, here obviously there's a side chapel here. The screen was saved from entire destruction by fire in 1825 by Thomas Lambert Hall of Steeple Hall in the parish, restored 1882. So yes, this was almost, and this is what was why I look at it and go, well, bits of it look medieval, but bits don't, because it's been it's almost destroyed by fire. So there we have it, Neen Savage, and you can see there the nice Norman tower arch and that big chunky Victorian font. That's the inside here, and again it's just this point, chancel arches are not always found in churches. There's a lovely sort of wagon roof there, and the roof is very much a feature of this church. So that's inside at Neen Savage. So now we're out of doors at Neen Savage, and again you can see this wonderful long sweep of the roof and this tower. At one point there was a spire on the tower, but that has disappeared at some point, maybe struck by lightning, maybe it just became unsafe and was pulled down because it was easier to pull it down than it was to repair it. Most historic churches like this have had, a lot has happened in history. There have been periods of neglect, there have been periods of restoration, and these have alternated quite often. So as you look around the outside, we'll note some of the features of this Norman church. And of course the first thing we notice again is that it is long. There is an apparent seam part way down which suggests it's been expanded at one point, which would make perfect sense, as it is very long, particularly given how small the village is. Villages, of course, grow and shrink over time, and churches don't always reflect the size of the village. Sometimes the size of the church reflects more to do with the importance of the village than its apparent size. You can see there looks to be, by that drain pipe, looks to be a seam on the outside of the building, which is often a sign that a building has been extended at some point, and indeed the masonry is different either side of it. So we're probably looking at a two-cell Norman church that's been massively extended that way. Probably in the 13th century. There's a Norman doorway over there. But we have the porch, which is Victorian, and there the doorway looks 13th century. Setting is quite peaceful. We're in the I believe the Neen refers to a river or a stream, which would make some sense, because there is a Neen or Nen in Cambridgeshire, different stream. Norman window there. Around the north side, which can be exciting, can be quite dull. Here we do have a blocked north doorway. We have there's the chimney, and you can see above the blocked doorway, as we saw on the inside, that little Norman window. And that suggests that and you can see where the stone changes, that is the original Norman church, and it's being extended later, perhaps later 12th century, perhaps in the 13th century. But not much later than that, I would say, from the rubble stonework and the windows that survive. And again, the Norman windows are very small because there's no glass in them. As we've noted, that the trick with the Norman windows is trying to let in as much light as possible and as little rain as possible, because we are in England, and the Normans, of course, Normandy is northern France. It's not that much warmer than southern England. Of course, the Normans also are Vikings. They're the Norsemen, hence they're Normans. And here we have that triple lance, which is a 13th century feature, and again suggests it's extended in the 13th century. And that makes sense. Very often in the 13th century you're looking at a period when there's an elaboration in the Eucharistic liturgy. That is, the Mass becomes more complicated. And there we have this doorway, and although obviously that moulding over the top isn't Victorian, the thing itself looks Norman, probably reset Norman priest's doorway. And there's the porch, that lovely Victorian porch. So that is briefly Neen Savage. given it's almost certainly named after a Norman knight, it would originally have been Neen Savage, but this is England, so we say Savage. As you can see, it's an interesting building, a good example of these long churches. They've obliterated the distinction between nave and chancel, and why not? And it's a very impressive building that remains in use to this day. Well, thank you for watching, and may God bless you and keep you until next time.